Welcome to Let's Unpack That, timely conversations for mental health providers. This series is presented by Headway, which explores the myriad of mental health care methods and best practices providers need to know to elevate client experiences today. I'm your host, Michael Heckendorn, licensed professional counselor and nationally certified counselor. I'm also the clinical lead of clinician education at Headway. And today I'm here with Jessica, licensed and independent clinical social worker and associate clinical director at Mightier. Mightier is a digitally accessible, at-home, play-based therapeutic program designed for kids and the adults who love them. Jessica will share her insights on understanding and managing cognitive distortions and applying those concepts to pediatric populations. During our time, we're going to cover how to help children practice thought awareness, management, and restructuring exercises through experiential and playful learning. We're also going to talk about established CBT tactics for thought-based work and when to consider relevant adaptations when working with and engaging neurodiverse children. And then lastly, we're going to talk about a play-based therapeutic approach and curriculum designed to help children explore cognitive distortions and practice cognitive reframing strategies. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Jessica, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your specialty?
Yeah, definitely. Michael, thank you for having me. Headway, thank you for having me. So my name is Jessica Ragnio. I am a clinical social worker by training. My background is primarily, prior to Mightier, my background is primarily in inpatient psychiatry, working with adolescents who are really struggling with anxiety and depression, emotional regulation issues, as well as school-based settings as well. Been with Mightier for a long time now, and my focus at Mightier, and I'll introduce what Mightier is a little more and how we approach things, but my focus is very much on curriculum development, our family programming, how we integrate clinical and therapeutic concepts into our gameplay. How do we deliver that education to parents? How do we make things fun, play-based, and enhance how we're supporting families in this more accessible way at home?
I mean, that's so amazing. And that as an adolescent therapist and child therapist, like I'm so happy for what Mightier and you are doing presently. So thanks so much for sharing. And truly at this point, I'm going to hand the microphone back over to you and you just can lead us through your presentation for today.
Sounds great. All right, let me share my screen. All right, so the presentation that I'm going to go through today is really, I'm going to call it a garden of thoughts. You will learn this very quickly that everything we do at Mightier, we like wrap into a metaphor. We want to take a concept, take a skill building approach and like turn it into something engaging for kids, deliver things through narrative, through play, through craft, through art, lots of different approaches. So a garden, and plants and slugs and weeds, like this is our metaphor for talking to kids about their thoughts. Specifically today, we are going to look at cognitive distortions and like their connection to psychological and emotional elements, that back and forth. We're also going to look at how to help children better understand and manage those cognitive distortions through CBT-based activities. And so there is a curriculum I'm going to go through, sort of like this pack of activities that I'll walk through and actually will make accessible to anyone watching this, in case this is something that you are looking to work on with your child at home or in therapeutic sessions with kids. So there is a resource share happening here as well. Just to start, let me talk a little bit more about Mightier itself. So like Michael mentioned, Mightier is this digitally accessible way for kids and families to engage with mental health, to work on emotional awareness, to practice emotional regulation, and to like explore these concepts and build skills at home. There's a really strong emphasis on access to care here because we know a lot of families don't have access to mental health care, right? So our goal is really how can we deliver effective and engaging mental health care into your home in a way that's like really truly built for kids and built for families. So specifically, what Mightier breaks down into in terms of like, what is this product? What is this program? What you see on the left here is an example of our biofeedback video game, which is essentially a way for kids to practice emotional regulation through play. Kids wear a heart rate monitor as they play the games. They can see their heart rate on screen at all times. And so it's a way to help them build that awareness of what's going on inside their body and how their body responds to the different emotions they're experiencing, and gets kids to practice emotional regulation and calming strategies as they play. There's a lot of like reward systems built into this. Kids feel really good as they're learning this skill and practicing this skill. A lot of like, we really center on like kid engagement and like empowerment, wanting kids to build the skill in a way that feels right for them. It's all based around practice. And like, if you think about a child who maybe knows their coping skills, can tell you their coping skills, but can't use them in real life when they actually need them, this is making that connection and like helping them really internalize and build that ability in a way that sticks and becomes more automatic in real life situations when they need it. And then the other half of our program is really just like all the wraparound stuff. We know kids don't exist in a vacuum. The parents who support children, like they want to know, how do I understand my child's emotions and their behaviors, and how do I help them at home, right? So we have a lot of educational programming built out for parents and families. We have like family-friendly activities and games that help you explore a certain emotion or build a certain skill alongside your child. And then also just like a parent view into what a child is learning and doing as they're playing Mightier. So that's like in essence, like a full view of all our programming. And then just a quick snapshot of who this is for. So back in 2010 is when we started like our clinical trials and our initial research. We've had ongoing studies since that time. But if we really think about who Mightier is for, if you picture a child who's struggling with emotional regulation, you might imagine, okay, a child who gets really angry, gets frustrated, might react aggressively, right? Or you might picture that child who gets really anxious and worries and shuts down and has low self-esteem, right? Those might be the same child, or they might present differently. But for both kind of categories of kids that we tend to see, those like internalizing and externalizing symptom patterns, Mightier is pretty effective for those. So we have parents reporting, I'm seeing change for my child. I'm seeing improvement. I'm seeing them feel better. I'm seeing them manage their emotions better. So those are kind of like the main groups of kids that we work with at Mightier. Now, let's dive into our cognitive distortions work and like really unpack that. So we are going to talk about cognitive distortions. This may or may not be a phrase everyone is familiar with, like therapeutically. If you're a therapist, you know this phrase, cognitive distortions, but it is a mouthful and it is not something we all use in everyday settings. We are going to talk about how to help kids build thought awareness and management skills, and then we're going to like look at some of the activities that are available and that will be like help us practice this. So what are cognitive distortions and why are they important? Why are they relevant? So in essence, cognitive distortions are those automatic, oftentimes negatively biased thoughts that impact our ability to perceive reality or interpret situations accurately and rationally. We all do this from time to time, right? So if you think back to when you're a teenager, like when you're in high school, right? And that time you're walking down the hallway and a group of kids starts laughing, right? As you walk by them, right? Like, and maybe this wasn't your thought, but it was my thought, like they're laughing at me, right? Like they are for sure laughing at me. They're making fun of me, right? If you also had a thought like that is an example of a cognitive distortion for two reasons. One, you don't know what those people are thinking, right? Like I am creating a truth, making an assumption in my head about what those people were thinking and saying and believing. And that assumption is based on my own emotional state, right? My own insecurities, my own self-esteem in a way, right? That's like a key example of where you might see cognitive distortions popping up. And it happens for all of us from time to time, but it specifically happens for folks who struggle more with their mental health, right? For someone who's struggling with anxiety, struggling with depression, or has like deep-rooted internalized, like say self-esteem issues, and that's coming out as anger, right? Like you really might see cognitive distortions playing a strong role in how they perceive things, interpret situations in a way that can like be really detrimental to their mental health, their relationships, to their self-esteem. So cognitive distortions are really relevant when we're trying to help anyone with their mental health, but specifically kids and teens as well, who are going to be my focus area today. All right, so where do cognitive distortions come from? So when they come from our emotional state, right? Like I mentioned, specifically, this has to do with like the connection between our thoughts and our emotions. The thoughts we have when we are feeling different emotions, that all changes, right? So how I think when I'm excited, happy, thankful is different from how I think when I'm calm. And that is different from how I think and the thoughts going through my head when I'm worried or anxious or sad and lonely or angry and resentful, right? Each of those emotional states has a direct influence on the thoughts that would be running through someone's head. Thoughts like this also come from experiences, patterns, what has been modeled to us by our parents, social media, like things we have learned, right? Our memories, right? A lot of influence, external influence as well. And our core beliefs, which we won't get into too much, but in essence, our core beliefs are like our sense of personal value. What are our feelings and beliefs around like our abilities and competence, safety and trust, lovability, right? So as you think about like as a baby, right, when you learn right away that like, okay, when I cry, like, is someone caring for me? Can I trust my caregivers to come pick me up, take care of me, meet my needs, right? Like you are learning at that stage, like, am I lovable? And can I trust the people around me, right? Like you are right away, we are all developing like some core beliefs. This happens all throughout our lives, right? But how those core beliefs develop has a big impact on how we automatically see ourselves, interpret situations, and like see our relationship with other people, and understand other people as well. And then another piece I want to get to before we get to the actual activities. So at Mightier, we work with a lot of kids who struggle with emotional awareness or emotional regulation, or just have a hard time initially like pulling those coping skills, calming strategies out into real life when they need it. Sometimes that is because those kids have a diagnosis like ADHD, like autism, that specifically impacts their specific executive functioning skills that are pretty important for emotional regulation. Those same executive functioning skills are also very important for awareness of our thoughts and the ability to like manage and reframe our thoughts. So I'm not going to go through this whole chart, but if we think specifically, if you work with a child with ADHD, a child diagnosed with autism, and they struggle with problem solving or flexible thinking or working memory or attentional control or self-monitoring, thought awareness and managing negative thoughts might also be more challenging for them. That also means it's really important to practice it, right? It becomes a very important skill to help them build and integrate into your work. All right, and so how are we going to do this? How are we going to help kids build this skill in general? We're going to take an approach that's going to kind of focus on 3 areas. One, we're going to treat it as a skill. When we think about skill building, we are going to, and I'll use this metaphor, probably overuse this metaphor, but like kids don't learn to ride a bike by talking about bikes and thinking about bikes, right? Like you have to get on the bike, you have to practice that, you develop your sense of balance, you have to develop your automatic reactions. In order to be able to pull a certain skill out in the real life moment when you need it, you have to practice it. So we're going to approach things that way, knowing that practice matters, and we have to give kids opportunities for that practice. We're going to use play because play promotes deeper learning. It also promotes engagement and motivation, right? So if we also are talking about kids, or we're talking about kids who maybe have things they would rather be doing than working on something like this, engagement matters, right? Like motivation matters. It matters that it's fun, and we can make it fun. And then let's break concepts apart individually. This will become clear as I go through the activities, but let's take these bite-sized introductions to help support comprehension. So actually, I have an example of that in the next one. All right. So here's an example of like the first activity. Let's jump back to that example I gave of like you're walking down the hall or you're at the playground somewhere and you notice kids whispering and laughing as you walk by, right? And the automatic emotions and thoughts might be something along the lines of like, you might be feeling hurt, angry, embarrassed, insecure, jealous, anxious. And that is paired with thoughts of like, they were laughing at me, they don't like me, I shouldn't have come here, they're mean, my clothes are embarrassing, right? The point here is not whether or not that thought is true. It is that your emotions and thoughts are connected. Like that is the first point we are trying to make to kids. The first step in this process is like, let's just understand, let's not work on challenging our thoughts yet. No, let's not work on like trying to convince you that like that thought might not be true. Let's just pair emotions and thoughts together and like hone in there. And so the example you see on the right of like one of the activities is just focusing on that pairing. So we're in the garden with this one. There are different types of weedy thoughts popping up. Weedy thoughts are going to be like our cognitive distortions, unhelpful thoughts. And then all you're doing is identifying the feeling underneath them or the potential. There might be multiple feelings underneath that thought, right? So it's just the pairing right now. So that's like an example of like the bite-sized approach to helping kids understand these concepts. Next one is, okay, so we understand that our emotions are connected to our thoughts. Now, how do you convince a child or help a child understand that like just because you think it doesn't mean it's true, right? Like that is a pretty advanced concept, right? We believe our thoughts, and we oftentimes are going to think like, well, of course, I had this thought through my head. Of course it's true. Why wouldn't that be true, right? That's a pretty big jump for a kid to make. And so one way to help them understand that you can't always trust your thoughts is one, to connect them to the emotion, two, to challenge like how realistic or rational is that thought, and three might be to like look at it in terms of like helpfulness and unhelpfulness. So this is looking at more of like behavioral impact. So on the left, what we're terming like helpful, grounded thoughts might be, okay, does this thought help you make a good decision? Is it rational or realistic? Does it allow you to figure something out and problem solve? Does it encourage or motivate you to do something you care about, right? That is in comparison to like an unhelpful or weedy thought that might lead you to make a bad decision or act in a way you regret later, or is unrealistic or irrational, or prevent you from figuring something out or solving a problem, or prevents you from doing something you really care about or think is important, right? So an example of that is like you care a lot about soccer, right? Like you love soccer, you play soccer a lot, you care a lot about soccer, and you're really worried about an upcoming tryout or something, right? You're so anxious about it. You're really worried you're not going to make the team. And you let that, and the thoughts are, I'm not going to make it. I'm not good enough. And you don't try, right? Like that thought, I'm not going to make it, gets in the way of you trying. And it's something you care deeply about, right? So that's an example of like how a thought could get in our way and actually be unhelpful to us. Okay, and so the activity here is, again, just spotting the difference between an unhelpful or a helpful thought. So this is this little snippet at the bottom. There's like a larger garden plot scattered with different types of thoughts, and you're just trying to find the weedy thoughts, trying to find the unhelpful thoughts. And that can just be a circling activity. You can turn it into more of a drawing thing. There could be lots of ways to go about that one. All right. Next, we're going to talk about some types of cognitive distortions. Some of these might sound familiar to any adults listening, for yourself or for the kids you work with, the kids you support, your own child. So again, Cognitive distortions are those negative self-defeating thoughts. They're like weeds in a garden. They get in our way. They prevent us from seeing things clearly. Cognitive distortions are so common that they have names, right? In like when you're training to be a therapist, you have that list, right? Like these things are named because they're so common. What we have done is we have just like drawn little pictures of representing them as weeds and like kind of renamed them a little bit. So an example of one type of cognitive distortion is the mind reading weed. This sprouts up when you believe you know what someone else is thinking, right? So that example I gave at the beginning about like kids laughing at you, right? They think I'm weird. She's mad at me, right? This is when you assume you know what's going on in someone else's head. But of course, we don't know what's going on in someone else's head unless they tell us. Negative filter weed. This sprouts up when you magnify the negative and ignore the positive, right? So let's think about soccer. I made a mistake in the game. My team lost because of me, right? Or I made a mistake on this test, even though you like got most of the stuff right? Like all you focus on is like the negative. You see the negative. You emphasize that over any of the positives. Black and white weed sprouts up when you view something as all or nothing. You might see this come up more when kids are like reacting out of frustration to something. Like, I never get picked. You always say no. You might have heard this from your child before. There's no gray area there, right? Which is not the case. Comparison weed, you compare yourself to others and you are most likely thinking of yourself more negatively than the other person, right? They are always you see them in a more positive light than you see yourself. So those are an example of some cognitive distortions. There are many more than that, but those are some pretty common ones for kids. All right, next we're going to jump into cognitive reframing tools, because first it's like, okay, we have awareness of, we have thoughts. They can be unhelpful or helpful. Sometimes we can name them as a specific type of cognitive distortion or weed. But now what do we do? Like, what do we do about that? Like, having awareness is actually really helpful. It does help like create this like little stopgap and insert like a sense of doubt. But there are also strategies that we use in cognitive behavioral therapy to help someone challenge and reframe these thoughts. And it's a lot about inserting doubt and trying to understand where these thoughts come from. So we're calling them de-weeding tools. I'm going to go through a few of these. First is the fact check. I like this one a lot. So this is forcing yourself. You've recognized like, okay, I'm having this thought. I believe it. I believe this thought, but let me force myself to challenge if this thought is true. So like, what evidence do I have that this thought is true? If you cannot come up with evidence that it's 100% true, it might not be true, right? So really challenge yourself to check the facts. Possibility play. Are there other ways of thinking about this? Can I come up with like one or two alternative thoughts, alternative like scenarios, things that might have happened in the situation? And then the bottom center one, find the feeling. So this is really identifying like, okay, the thought I'm having might be based in a feeling I'm having. So I think this situation won't work out. I think I won't make the soccer team because I care a lot about soccer and I'm really scared that I won't make the team, right? That doesn't mean I won't make the team, but it's just like, okay, wait, let me identify where this thought is coming from. And this thought is actually telling me something about my emotions and what I care about. So those are a few of the tools that we're going to give kids as well. And there are a few activities that I won't show here, but help kids practice the tools as well. Okay, and then the last few activities we're going to talk about, and we're going to play this last one, is, so a few things. At Mightier, we like to use a little bit of narrative. We have these creatures called lovelings. Lovelings have little personalities. They have a hot and a cool state. They have something they really care about. They're really passionate about. They're also like really struggling with something in particular. So Sluggo, who is a slug, just by chance, which is great for the garden, really is really caring, really thoughtful, cares a lot about what other people think about them, right? And so naturally that leads to overthinking, and struggling with cognitive distortions, right? Thinking other people don't like him, really having a hard time there. So there's a little narrative, a little write-up that if you're working with a child, maybe they will identify with that. Maybe reading that will help bring this concept to life for them. We like to do a lot of drawing activities. So there's a little comic, you're helping Sluggo manage a weedy thought, but like free reign, like create that situation, create that scenario for Sluggo and help them through it. And so tell that story and draw that story. So really leaning into creativity and expression there for kids. And this last one is Sluggo's gardening game, which Michael and I are going to attempt to play in a second. But let me walk through this game and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So what this is, and I have like a little printout, it's a board game. And so the goal of this board game is to help Sluggo get from start to finish, help Sluggo get across the garden. Sluggo is going to Sluggo's going to have thoughts along the way. Sluggo is going to have positive, helpful thoughts that will help him move forward. And Sluggo is going to have unhelpful, weedy thoughts that will block him and stop him from moving. The point here is just trying to communicate to kids that unhelpful thoughts get in your way. Regardless of whether or not they're true, they get in your way. They prevent you from moving forward, reaching your goals, right? But if we use a de-weeding tool, a cognitive reframing exercise, that can move you forward. If you can change your thought, you might change your emotion and it'll actually move you forward. So that's the way the mechanic of this game actually works, is that I have a bunch of cards here, some little Sluggo tokens. As you pull a card, if it's a positive thought, you move forward a space. If it's negative, you're blocked. But you have a few opportunities to use a de-weeding tool. And if you successfully use one, then you actually move forward 2 spaces. All right. So that is how we play this game. Michael, are you ready to attempt to play this game?
Let's do it. I also just want to say for those who are watching this, you also have the ability to download these games and these activities, so that way you can take it and use them with your own clients as well. But I don't know if there's a winner or loser of this game, but I'm competitive, so I'm gonna win.
Well, we're gonna play 2 rounds.
Great.
I'm not of the full game. We'll take 2 turns. Okay, so first, here are our little Sluggo tokens that I already cut out. Would you like to be blue or green?
I would like to be green.
Okay. All right, I'm going to have you go first. So I'm going to go back and forth as we play this. So here's start. Michael is green. I'll be blue. And then I just have a stack of cards. Some of these are thought cards. Okay. Let me shuffle these a little bit.
Right.
I don't know what's going to come up. So
great. This is not we did not rehearse this.
No, didn't practice this at all. Okay, so your thought is, okay, it's a cute little card. It's my fault all the time. All right. So Michael, is this a helpful or unhelpful thought?
That's an unhelpful thought.
That's an unhelpful thought. Okay. So here's your little card, your little Sluggo. So you're at start. You can, there's another rule in this game that we're going to kind of ignore for now. But in reality, I think you get 2 de-weeding tool opportunities.
Okay.
So would you like to stay at start, or would you like to use one of your de-weeding tools and try to change that thought?
I'm gonna use a de-weeding tool.
Okay. All right. Would you like to, your options, just so you know, and you can think about this. Would you like to find the feeling? Would you like to possibility play? So come up with like another possibility. Come up with 2 positive thoughts, or check the facts.
I'll check the facts.
Okay. All right.
And
So
could you read for everybody, could you reread the unhelpful thought again?
Yeah. I don't know if this is backwards on my screen. Okay. It's my fault all the time. And your de-weeding tool is you're going to check the facts. Do you know that thought is true? So real time.
Well, there's nowhere where it's written that it's my fault all the time. And I know that yesterday it was my sister's fault, and something happened with my sister. And so I know that's not true all the time.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So it's not always my fault. Things aren't always my fault. Sometimes something happens and it's someone else's fault. Okay, great. So you get to move forward 2 spaces. Would you like to go this way, or would you like to go
Well,
this way?
I'm looking ahead and I see that there's if I land there, I'm gonna lose a turn. So I'm gonna go the bottom road.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay, great. And then it would be my turn. I would pick a card. I said sorry, and it was all okay. All of these are out of context. So I said whatever I did, I said sorry, and it was okay. Rather than avoid the situation, blame myself. So I get to move forward 1 spot. So I'll move, I don't know, somewhere on this board.
Yeah.
But
And
that's essentially, yeah, go ahead.
I also think like in this moment, like that could be a fun, well, working with a client, like I could talk about like, hey, what's a time that you said sorry and that it was okay?
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about that and let's share that and hear it live in the moment while we're playing this game.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's something, so that's as far as we'll go with this game.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
that is something I love for the way these are built, especially when, as a therapist, if you're using them in sessions, like make them your own. Like there are so many like conversation starters that are just going to happen from these games. And then like you take it where you want to, because like, you know, the child best, and you know, you want to open those doors for like, yeah, like talking about a specific thing from their life, or really digging into something that you know is really hard for them. So lots of ways to adapt these and kind of like really be creative with them. So
yeah. No, that's wonderful. And thanks so much for bringing all of this to our listeners and to our viewers here. And I just, again, like I'm so excited to like take some of these things and use them in my practice as well. So any last words or anything else that you'd like to share with everybody before we close our time?
No, I really appreciate getting the opportunity to share these materials. I think they're like I personally really enjoy taking these concepts that we try to deliver in therapy that are oftentimes hard to, especially this cognitive distortion stuff. Like that's a hard concept for kids. And so trying to boil that down into a game, into something that's engaging, and then like make it playful. I feel really lucky to get to do that, and really excited to get to share that work out. I work with a game designer in making all this. It's a really fun process, and I'm really excited to share that with the larger therapeutic community and give everyone a chance to use these. So
no, that's incredible, and thank you for taking the time to create these with the game designer, and like I think it's going to be so useful for all the child adolescent therapists that we have out there. And you're so right, teaching that abstract thought of like metacognition and like thinking about your thoughts, like it's such a hard thing to do with young ones. And so this I feel like takes it into the like concrete world of like of play, and like we can actually see like we're making progress or we're not making progress based on those thoughts. And so yeah, just it's wonderful, and I'm just so thankful. So before we close, just a quick reminder that Let's Unpack That is brought to you by Headway, the all-in-one platform that makes running an in-network practice really easy and profitable by taking away the administrative burden of working with insurance. We partner with more than 30,000 mental health providers from all 50 states, making us the largest mental health network in the country. We hope you enjoyed it and found this time really valuable. And please be sure to tune in to our other episodes in this 4-part series. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.